What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Spectators. Happy Tuesday, y'all. It is the week before the Super Bowl, so we are gonna not talk about the Pro Bowl that happened this weekend. And I am joined here with our soccer brother, Devin. We're gonna get into some stuff he's excited to talk about, and I'm gonna let him kind of explain what's going on today. What's going on, dude?
Hey man, glad to be back on the podcast. It's been a while. Happy to be back. I definitely have something really exciting to talk about when it comes to sports. So I'm really excited to dive deep into this.
All right, let's get into it. Tell the people what you got for us today.
Yeah. So in the last month, there's been a lot of talk, a lot of animosity, a lot of discussions about this January transfer window when it comes to European and international football. A really polarizing figure and team is Chelsea Football Club. My favorite team um, is almost
You
unheard
see the
of a
flag.
team. Right here,
You see
yes,
the
sir.
flag.
um, it's almost unheard of to have such a crazy transfer window where there are 8 players signed in the matter of 4 weeks, and a team that spends $1 million in that time frame for those 8 players. And when it comes to the laws and regulations for the sport, financial fair play is a huge kind of law abiding figure that teams cannot spend more than they bring in. So it's crazy to think that with that law in place, a team can still spend that much money, and it all
Well,
changed
what was the number again?
for the amount that they spent,
Yeah,
100 million.
just in this
But
transfer window.
500 million since last summer, but 300 million in the span of these 4 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
8 players. It's insane. And one of the reasons why financial fair play has come into effect is to stop teams like Manchester City, who was bought had a new ownership back in 2008, and who had a new owner back in 2011, 2012, to stop teams like that just from kind of buying success. For the most part, they have been, at least financial fair play in UEFA and FIFA, they've been successful in trying to stop these teams from just kind of buying success. But as any new ownership and new big boys in the sport, they're going to try to find loopholes. And the reason why I'm saying all this is because Chelsea also have a new ownership that they were brought in about 18 months ago, uh, and the new owners are led by the consortium of Todd Boehly, who also owns the Dodgers. Um, so I want to get your take on this, or at least what you know as your background, Jew, about how do transfers or how do trades work in especially MLB and NBA. Like I want to know like how long are like the contract lengths. What kind of money's being dished out.
Well, so you mentioned that first of all, let's like go into Todd Boehly, right? So Todd Boehly, like you said, he's the newest owner of Chelsea, and he's like the figurehead, right? The spearhead of the ownership group, right?
Muted
Oh,
you.
yeah. We're good. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, the typing is crazy. I can't type on
Yeah,
Discord anymore.
the
Um,
hotkey is crazy.
but I was just saying the let's just start with Todd, right? And Todd Boehly. So
Yeah.
he, like you said, he's the newest owner of Chelsea, and he's like the figurehead essentially of this
Mhm.
ownership group that just got put into place. I know they bought the team last year. I think the old owners were like a little stressed out about like consecutive not so great seasons or something of that nature. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Oh, yeah. So this all, I mean, if just to a little bit of a background, I think it's important for the reason
Yeah.
why there's new owners.
Yep.
It all started with the huge uh, war between Ukraine and Russia, and
Hmm.
how pretty much a lot of countries went to Ukraine's aid. The reason why that makes it difficult for and why that relates to this sport and Chelsea Football Club is the owner at the time of Chelsea Football Club was Roman Abramovich. He is a billionaire and Russian oligarch. And once the Russia began efforts on Ukraine, the UK government completely froze all of Roman's assets in the country of England. So his main asset is Chelsea Football Club. So Chelsea were no longer able to sign new players. The current players weren't allowed to sign new contracts, and so on and so forth. They completely from top to bottom
Just
are
froze the
frozen.
money. That's
So he
wild.
wasn't. Yeah. So there was a time, and that came around the time of last year's January transfer window when we were trying to get different players. Trying to push on after a great European run when we won the Champions League, so on and so forth. Um, we lost about 4 players to new teams who were their contracts running out, and they just signed on a new contract with different teams, so on and so forth. And from that point on, Roman Abramovich decided just to step down and to put Chelsea up for sale. Many different figures came through of who might want to purchase Chelsea, and the one that led the race for the longest time was the group led by Todd Boehly, who is the figurehead. He also has a partner, Hans-Georg Wyss, who's a Swiss billionaire. But Todd Boehly is the main figure now.
Okay, and I do think that's important, just because like I didn't actually know that. That's kind of wild about the frozen assets. Um, Kind of shout out to him, I guess, for like just being like cut my losses. Let's just sell this, and
Yeah,
it's probably for the better for the organization because like you mentioned, Todd, he is one of the owners in the Los Angeles Dodgers. And if there's anything that American sports fans know about the Dodgers, is that they are, in my opinion, they are one of like the three best run organizations in all of American sports, right? And that is baseball is a really hard sport to get good at running, right? Because you have to worry about contracts and current players. You have to worry about coaching and current coaching systems, and there's hitting coaches, pitching coaches, all these different types of stuff. Then you also have to worry about drafting and managing prospects, and prospect managing, and how do you evaluate them, and how do you develop them, and how do you judge whether or not to trade them for certain guys is definitely something that the Dodgers have become probably the best at in the sport. And it actually feels kind of parallel to how soccer does it, where you sign these kids. I know some soccer, not every team does it, but a lot of the major clubs will sign youth at what 14, 15 years old, have them grow up through their organizations, and then eventually you have Leo Messi that you've had for 25 years at Barca, and it's just like, oh well, he's just been here his whole career, right? So
right. Yeah,
the Dodgers kind of run a little bit similarly. Nobody stays in the baseball organization that long, though, and that'll probably never really happen again outside of a handful of guys. But I think it's important to know that Todd became owner of the Dodgers in 2019. He's with the Guggenheim Baseball Management with Magic Johnson and a couple of other big, super rich people. So he's in on that. So he already owns a team and sees how a properly run organization works, functions, and succeeds. And that's like obviously the main part here for you and Chelsea fans is now he's taking this winning culture, this super glamorized team over with the Dodgers that spend a whole lot of money whenever they want, and he's bringing it to world soccer, and that's going to be something super important. And here's a tell me if there's any parallels here. Back in I think it was 2019, and I might be it might have been 2018, but I think it was 2019. The Red Sox are fresh off a World Series win. Their best player goes by the name of Mookie Betts. He was insane that season. He wins MVP. They win the World Series, and the Dodgers look at the Red Sox and Mookie Betts are like, hey, we want that guy. And the Red Sox are like, man, well, we don't really want to pay him $40 million a year, so we can make a deal. So they wind up trading for Mookie Betts, the best player in baseball for that season, sign him to a 36, $37 million deal for the next 11 years. And they gave up almost nothing because it was just prospects and young guys and draft. You can't trade draft picks in MLB, but just young guys. And pretty much the Dodgers for free get a top 5 player in baseball. And then the next 2 seasons are like, oh, well, we traded for a top 5 player in baseball. Let's do that again for the next 2 years. Next season, they trade for a top 5 pitcher, Max Scherzer and Trey Turner. The next year, they sign a free agent, probably the best first baseman in the game in Freddie Freeman, and it's like, man, they just get whoever they want for whatever they want. What's going on? Who's gonna stop these guys?
Insane. Yeah.
Please stop them. And it's you look at their team and it's like, well, there's not like a hole on it, and it's like 8 years running where it's like this team is just loaded at every position.
Essentially, for the players that the Dodgers were getting, sending just kind of risky, unknown prospects, players the other way. So essentially,
Exactly.
Boston got a bunch of young players that are unproven.
Exactly.
They were totally fine with that trade.
And I mean, they were fine with it for a couple of reasons,
In
like
the
the
moment,
the money, right? Boston was like,
yeah.
hey, we have these other young guys that like we want to hopefully keep them in the future, and maybe that'll work, and that way we don't have to pay this guy all this money to go through a rebuild, blah 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 blah. So the Dodgers wind up getting this guy for minimal prospect value, and I mean they gave up their second best prospect at the time, who's turned into like a pretty decent MLB player, but a decent MLB player versus a fantastic MLB player is like wearing some chanclas from Walmart and then getting some Louboutins. Like it's a difference. It's a big difference.
So one of the one of the things that I kind of took out of explaining like what really happened and what they did is player swaps is something that is pretty much of in soccer. Not a lot of teams actually are used to doing player swaps. It doesn't really happen that often.
It's mostly just money, right?
Mostly just money. Give me money, give me a player, right? And nothing's ever really come out and true, but there has been ever since Todd Boehly came in, and a lot of rumors being tossed around that we've been linked with players in the past since he came in for player swap deals, and I've seen so many different ones. Hakim Ziyech to PSG to get one of the younger players. Like there's so many different rumors, but none of them actually came to fruition. A lot of the players that we've signed are just for a flat
Yeah.
money transfer for the player. So and I can understand that those rumors probably are true, just based on the fact that player swaps are so popular in not only MLB but for
All American
NBA
sports.
and,
Yeah,
and
all American sports.
all American sports essentially. Um, thing that really stood out to me is that you said that what was the guy's name from Boston that went to the Dodgers?
Oh, Mookie
The first
Betts.
one?
Mookie
Mookie
Betts.
Betts. He signed what, an 11-year contract?
I believe it's 11 years. I'd have to look that up real quick, but I'm pretty sure it was 11 years.
Something longer than
It was
a really
significant. It was at least a decade. Yeah.
crazy thing about the sport, at least in European soccer, the most commonly used contracts stem from maybe 5 years. No players are ever signed for deals longer than 5 years. I've seen maybe a 6-year deal, but that's
Mhm.
like rare.
Mhm.
Ever since Todd Boehly has come in as the new owner, we have seen every single one of these January transfers, all 8 of them, they're all 7.5 to 8 year deals, and those are insane. Like the reason why the soccer contracts don't go that long is because these players play so many games
Their
throughout the
legs,
year,
their legs just
and
wind up giving out, and
yeah,
they
and
depreciate probably.
yeah, and also like in these 3-year contracts and these 5-year contracts, there's always contract extensions.
Mhm.
So once the player gets down to like 1 year left in their contract or 2 years, they're gonna start going into contract talks, especially if they're doing really well, so they can do contract extensions. And you can see players doing a contract extension every year if they want to stay at the club and they're doing so well.
Yeah.
Um, that's not the reason why Todd Boehly is doing this 7-8 year deals. It's literally he found a loophole that no other team has
Okay.
really even tried to do. So when you sign, let me break this down as our most expensive signing that we've ever signed in
Okay.
January. Enzo Fernandez, Argentinian center mid, World Cup, was a Golden Boy of the World Cup. He's definitely bright young star, only 21 years old. He is going to be he's going to be insane. He bought him for 115 million dollars, and we signed him on an 8-year contract. He's here for pretty much, if all things go well, he's going to be here pretty much for his entire career.
His whole prime.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. And the way that these deals work, or at least they can work, is payment cycles. So what Todd Boehly has done, not only for a transfer but for others, he went and said, "Yep, we're gonna pay." He previously Enzo Fernandez was at Benfica, so they went to Benfica and they said, "Hey, we understand that your his release clause is at 150 million. We're gonna pay that. We're gonna give you about 30 million up front, and then we're gonna divide up the rest of the payment on an annual cycle until the end of his contract, right? So that means he's gonna be spending we're gonna be paying Fika 15 million every season after this season,
Okay.
and that actually kind of is a crazy loophole for financial fair play because financial fair play's rules go on an annual setting. So it's you make much based on your Champions League
And it's how
run,
much you
what
give
you
that
got
team per year.
per year. So there's nothing, they're
Yeah.
not breaking any rules. And so once Todd Bowley found that, now every single one of our players, obviously was our last signing, but he figured this out when uh a young French center back, but Benoit Badiashile at the very
What a
first day of the
name.
transfer window. I
What a
know, right?
name.
But yet, has his, African roots. But yeah, it's insane how on paper we spent 300 million just 4 weeks. Really, we've only spent like 70, 80 million
For like the
just
season. Yeah.
for the season. Yeah. And so yeah, and it's all just stems back on to the 7, 8 year contracts. And so that's clearly kind of a crossover from in sports that all bunch of these professional players sign long year deals.
Yeah.
It's just crazy how nothing ever was thought about this before in the sport, and now this is just only the start for Todd Bowley's reign. I mean, who knows what else he's going to do, because he just in the span of 8 months since he started, well, he's already changed so much, especially with this transfer loophole. But he's completely cleaned house of the not only the recruitment team but the director of football, the CEO. He has kind of put in his own people in the club, and I can definitely see kind of a parallel of, especially from what you've mentioned earlier about the change that LA Dodgers made back in 2015 and how that has resulted in their previous success since then. It's insane, how good this guy can be as an owner.
Well, and I think this is a perfect parallel to what he's taken from owning the Dodgers. It has to be because one of the best players in baseball. He's not on the Dodgers. He's a Dodger killer. In fact, his name's Bryce Harper, and he was like the prodigal son as a prospect. He was hitting balls 500 feet out of high school. He was the number one overall pick. He was like the fastest player ever to get brought up from draft to the MLB and make his debut since like the modern era. And pretty much upon impact, he's been an MVP caliber player. He's won 2 or 3 already. He won Rookie of the Year, and he's won a World Series. Or no, he's been to a World Series now. And he signed a deal after his rookie contract was up with a new team, and it was I can look this up real quick. It was something of like 14. It was 13 years, $330 million when he signed the deal.
Wow.
Insane, right? 13 years. Granted, this guy was not even 30 yet by the time he signed it. Baseball's prime is more 28 to 33 as opposed to most sports. It's like 25 to 29. Baseball's a little bit later because it's not quite as fast twitch movements, right? So he's going to spend all of his prime in baseball on this team, and then the end half of his career, he'll be there also making all of his money. The reason this deal is significant is because the way that baseball evaluations work is they connect your worth to something called WAR, and that's your wins above replacement. So if you're to be replaced by the most league average player, the baseline player, how much better are you than them in terms of the wins you bring into your team? And every one WAR you have is connected to, allegedly, like this is how they evaluate people, $8 million per season. So the more WAR you have at the end of the year, the quote unquote more valuable you are to a team. According to WAR and according to like the money attached to WAR, Bryce Harper is significantly higher than the money that he's made after the very first season that he was there. So the first season he wasn't, but after, so the war value has gone up since he signed because of inflation, because other contracts, other players are signing equally big deals worth more money, this, that, and the other thing. And teams are starting to notice, like, hey, if we sign this superstar guy and take the risk on 10, 12, 13 years, we might be actually saving money instead of signing him for 4 years and then having to hopefully extend him and have to pay him more. Or now he's worse, and now we just don't want him. And that's like the safe route. But if he's worth more year 2, 3, 4, 5, you're saving money and able to like put that towards other things, and you're getting this guy way worth and above his value. And that's 13 years is a crazy long time. Like that's
Yeah.
half as old as we are in a couple months here.
I mean, 13, 14 years, that's like players' careers, especially in soccer,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, exactly. And baseball careers are probably around that too, even for like star players. So he might not play out the full length of his career. He might have to do an extension at some point because again, he's still pretty young. So I do think it has a lot to do with that. And he sees in baseball, it's like, hey, we can take this contract, make it as long as possible, and hope that young guy, he's 21, you said for Angel, that he can spend his whole career with us. And by the time that he's in his year 24 season, he's worth way more than that 15 million we're giving him. He's worth 30, 40 million, but we took the risk and now he's given us way good ROI. It's definitely a risk, but it's something baseball has seen, and there's not a whole lot of young stars that it's missed on so far. The guy I mentioned earlier, Mookie Betts, it's hit on him. Bryce Harper, it's hit on him. Manny Machado, it's done well for him. Mike Trout has done well for him. So it's like a lot of the big guys that have gotten those 13-year deals so far, it's like, oh yeah, this works. Okay, cool. Let's just do this more.
Yeah. And I think the only thing that might not stick as a parallel to this sport is the way you were explaining these players making risks on these new players. It's all about getting increasing their asset and their
Yeah.
their value over time. In soccer, especially if you're spending 150 million at the end of the day on one player, thinking at least from a fiscal point of view, you're not looking to increase that value on that player. You already spent 115 million on him. No, if he eats, let's even if he gets even better in the span of 4 years, he's just a player that's just invaluable. And we can even look at that now as Kylian Mbappe, right?
Yeah.
Kylian Mbappe came on
The
the
money
scene
doesn't matter. Yeah.
yeah, the money doesn't matter. Kylian Mbappe came on the scene for AS Monaco and completely lit it up. Lit it up for AS Monaco, right? He was linked to every team: Man City, Chelsea, Real Madrid. But he ended up at PSG for initially on a 2-year loan deal. So he's still owned by Monaco. He went to go play for PSG on a 2-year deal, and at the end of the 2 years, PSG were had an obligation to buy him for around like 200 million, right? And that was before. This was, mind you, this was before he won his first World Cup in Russia in 2018, and this is before his pretty much all of his success since then. Since he signed for PSG, you signed him for essentially 260 million. Eventually, that's how they kind of got around financial fair play. But now look at Mbappe's value. Who's going to buy him now? Like he's 23 years old. At the time he was 17. Now he's 23. He's even better than he was before. So if all these teams, or especially PSG now, is like, well, if we bought him at 263 million, but someone's going to go buy him for 300 million? There ain't
Probably
no way.
not.
That's
Yeah,
insane.
probably
Like no
not.
team can afford that. Even the
Hmm.
Real Madrid, who's like one of the biggest and most profitable
They
brands in the
wanted
entire
to.
sport.
They wanted
They
to,
wanted to.
and
Yeah.
he said no.
So yeah, and so the reason why I'm bringing that up is these teams buy these players for these crazy amounts is because when you win the Champions League, when you win the Premier League, when you even qualify for Champions League, get the top 4 spot in your league, the money payout, insane. Like the difference between playing the Europa League, which is like kind of like this dud mediocre European competition, and the money you get from playing the Champions League, like it's insane. And all of that goes towards like the money you bring in to buy more players. So
Yeah.
that makes all the difference. So clearly there's not only is Todd Boehly, making this the groundwork of all these players who are under the age of 21 or have contracts that extend past 2030. Um, is also getting these crazy young kids because they've proven that they're so good, and we're trying to push for that Champions League money. I mean, we're in 10th place right now. We're a long far away from that Champions League spot, getting 4th place. We're definitely a long way from even winning the Premier League, and the Champions League this season. We're in the round of 16. Who knows how far we can go? But yeah, all of that is to get the profits from winning things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's definitely a huge risk signing all these players who are
Of
that young
course.
on long-term deals. But in the long run, it's when you think about how much we're spending each year on these players, it's really not that much.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know when I say like return on investment or improving value, it's not necessarily just to trade them or sell them or whatever.
Right.
It's just like, hey, I'm giving you this much because they pay them yearly in MLB. So it's like, hey, I'm paying you $35 million this year, but you gave me 7 WAR. So realistically, I should have paid you 42. That's really what it is. It's just like if I was paying per dollar, I saved money, and that's nice. That's really all it is, because that there's a reason they like attach the money value to your WAR or anything like that, just for these guys to try and like justify money spent and justify putting, uh, you know, allocating resources to certain things and this, that, and the other. So that's the only reason for that. But no, that's you're definitely right. And again, soccer is weird with loans and you're able to like push money a certain way. And now obviously the way that Todd is doing this, where he's just putting in increments over time. It's also good to do the increments because money's gonna depreciate. Like that 15 million, and they're gonna pay it over however long you said, that 8 years.
8 years.
In 6 years, it's not gonna be worth 15 million right now. It's just not. And you're not
Yeah.
going to be able to buy as much. And granted, the team that they probably gave that money to is like, oh, we don't care. We just need 15 million, like, because
Yeah.
they need
Well,
it.
yeah, Benfica doesn't. Benfica. Well, Benfica is a team that is known to just kind of their recruiting team is insane. They recruit these young kids, and then by the time they get in their prime, like 20 or like early prime, 2021, they're sending these players off to these other big teams
To
for
actually
astronomical
compete.
fees.
Yeah, to actually
I mean,
compete.
look at Darwin Nunez, the Uruguayan striker for Liverpool. Now he came from Benfica for 90 mil. João Felix, who's a crazy Portuguese star, was originally at Atletico after signing from Benfica. He's now at Chelsea, but Atletico Madrid's paid 120 million for him, and now Chelsea have spent 120 million on or 150 million on Enzo Fernandez. Like Benfica, like this money is insane for them. So in a small team like that, that money is astronomical. So, but even then, like in let's say like you said, in 5 6 years, after 5 6 years into Enzo's contract, they on the hopefully Chelsea, we become successful. We might hopefully get a Champions League or a Premier League, or we just are even better than we have been in the past. Like the money we get from those, the money we spend on Enzo Fernandez and these other players aren't gonna matter. Like this is like it's the money we get from winning is going to make these signings successful, and that's really all that matters.
Yeah,
That's
and part of it too is like fan engagement at the end of the day, also, right?
Mhm.
Like you go out, and I think there's not necessarily a monetary value, although there definitely is with like jersey sales and all this. But you go get Angel, fresh off a World Cup run, for probably the proudest soccer country in the world next to Brazil. So you're taking the golden boy from the golden country that just won a World Cup, following up Messi. Everybody's loving Argentina right now. You add him to your team. You're like, I remember seeing that guy. He was awesome. I don't follow a Premier League team, or I don't care. Let's go root for Chelsea. Let's go buy a
Mhm.
Chelsea jersey. I want to go see him play in the Chelsea stadium. Like those things matter, and they really
Yeah.
are like impactful. Like ratings for Chelsea games are probably going to double in Argentina, or like maybe
Mhm.
not double, but they're going to be like significant increases just because of things like that.
Yeah.
And that's why getting stars, going and making a big trade, uh holding a prospect that's highly touted, or getting a high draft pick, those things matter. And like having those guys kind of go up through the ranks and become the stars and sell the jerseys and be the face of
Yeah.
the franchise. Those are important.
Yeah. Well, just funny that you mentioned that. Just on a quick note on this whole, fan engagement thing. I saw a few months ago a metric came out in a graph about TV views for Everton games. Everton FC is a team in the Premier League who's a very mediocre team. Sometimes they barely fight to make sure they're not relegated. Sometimes they make a top 10 push. They're really nothing special about them. Everton fans, have been hurting and struggling for a while. Oh, so in Colombia, Everton games were in like the couple maybe 100,000 views, right? And Everton go and sign James Rodriguez, World Cup star, like literally the golden boy of Colombia. Ever since he signed, no longer at the club by the way, but when he first signed, the Everton game views were in like the tens of millions of. So going from a couple 100,000 views of Everton games to tens of millions, it's insane. Like Everton only paid like what, like 25 million on James
And
Rodriguez. He was at
that
the
was
front of
crazy
the
too,
career.
because it's not like Colombia won the World Cup. I think they went to the quarters or the semis.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think they just went to the quarters. They won one like playoff game, and he was the golden boy. And I mean,
Yeah.
he definitely was the best guy on that team, and he was really fun. But
Yeah.
it's it's a good point. It's just there are impacts and ripples for adding these guys, especially right after a World Cup push and a World Cup win. And sometimes it might be more important than necessarily the product on the field, and that's just kind of how it goes sometimes. This guy Angel is good, and obviously you hope that they are good when they're young.
And it's interesting and kind of like weird state of limbo for me as an American looking at English and UK media, because when it comes to the UK media and just fans in general, they hate American. They hate American owners. The Manchester United, like the most successful brand and probably all in the entire sport, owned by Americans. I can't remember the group that they're owned by.
It's the one that used to own the Bucks. I don't believe they do
Yeah,
anymore.
the
um
Glazers.
the
The Glazers.
Glazers.
Yeah. So they're owned by the Glazers, right? Um, and the Glazers have been known as they just care about their money. They care about their asset. So they really didn't spend much money for Manchester United. All of their success came from having a brilliant coach, Sir Alex Ferguson, who had 30 years of insane success, winning so many Premier League titles, is the most successful team in the Prem, and also won several Champions Leagues. And once he retired, that Manchester United team completely crumbled. And that's when the Glazers realized that they're losing money now because their team is not as successful. So then they start just pouring money into the club. Oh, it was wasteful spending. So yeah, Manchester United fans hate the Glazers. You look at other Americans like Walter Kroenke, I think is the owner for Arsenal. Like I said, he's cares about his money. They don't really pour that much money into the team. Liverpool are owned by the team owners that own the Red Sox.
I
Um,
believe so. I know LeBron's a part
like the
owner in
Fenway Group.
Liverpool too.
Yeah. But either way, so Americans really aren't that welcomed in the UK. But the difference is that the American now that owns Chelsea has been just pouring money into the club. So it makes the Chelsea fans extremely excited. And he's definitely making a difference.
Yeah, and I feel bad for like the people in the UK because it's not like all American owners are bad. Just a lot of them
Right.
tend to be, and a lot of them just have a lot of money. Like that's just what it comes down to. The Glazers just have a lot of money. I saw a really good clip yesterday, and it was mostly referring to like black billionaires because there's like I think 8 black billionaires like in America, and like 6 of them are like Jay-Z and Oprah and like guys like people you've heard of and have seen and have consumed their stuff, and like 80% of the white billionaires you just don't know. They're just dudes, and they're not billionaires with like a singular. They are like billions heirs because you only need 1 billion to be a billionaire. These guys have like 5, 6,
There's
7, $8
100.
billion
Yeah.
dollars. And that's the amount of money it takes to buy a team. At
Mm.
least here, like the Phoenix Suns are for sale right now, and they're trying to sell them for $2 billion. It's like the Phoenix Suns were maybe the worst organization in American sports for a decade, and they're going for $2 billion. It's like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And it takes crazy money, and so usually those guys don't have foresight in terms of sports or recruiting or prospect
Yeah.
processes or
Looking at them.
whatever it might be, because they just have the money. They just happen to have the money, and they're like, "Oh, I'm good at business." It's like, well, okay, cool. Now put a good rotation in for baseball and go make a good draft, even though you have the 25th pick, and it doesn't
But
work.
hey, we'll take a punt on you.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't work as well, and so
Yeah.
getting guys that know what they're doing, and granted, it doesn't translate in terms of like the scouting process. Like it's different, obviously. They're completely different sports, but just being in a room full of guys who know what they're talking about really, really matters. And this is now a guy who knows what he's talking about from being in
Mm.
those rooms and being in these places and being around winners. Like, I mean, he's part owner with Magic Johnson. Like, Magic's not a good owner, but he's like, he's been around a lot and he cares.
Yeah.
Those two things matter, you know?
I think the important thing in all of that is he knows Todd Boehly knows he doesn't know thing about the sport, but he's hiring the right people. He knows where to go to find recruiters and different people that know what they're doing. And that's just how all successful clubs are run. I mean, the reason why I want to kind of like segue into this is Man City. Ever since they were bought, they're they completely revamped and completely had a structure in place for success. Get the right recruiters. They and Guardiola, one of the best coaches in the sport. So yeah, knowing the right people, who to employ is pretty much more valuable than the money itself, essentially, because you can not know what to do with the money once you are a club. Um, but speaking of Man City, it's crazy how ironic this can be, with the amount that Chelsea have spent in just January alone. Manchester City are being charged with breaching financial rules in previous seasons, and they are essentially being threatened with not only getting their titles revoked from when they won the
Really?
Premier League a few times from 17, 18, and 2011, 2012. They're facing like being completely relegated from the Premier League to go down
Really?
to the Championship. So a lot of talk is being, it's obviously not only about Manchester City, but like look at Chelsea. They just spent 300 million in 4 weeks.
How
Like,
do they get away with
surely,
this? Yeah.
how did they get away with that? This is how they got away with it. But it's just so funny and ironic, to just see a club that thinks they're finding a way to around a loophole, but financial fair play and UEFA, who kind of this law, found a way to nip them in the bud. Um, who knows? We only see what we see at face value, what comes out in the
Yeah.
reports. So it might be much more complicated than just allocating the transfer fee over years, and there might be something more to it. But
Giving
from
assets that don't necessarily have money value or things of that
yeah,
nature probably come into play also.
yeah, and since everyone wants to be like, oh, Chelsea are next, Chelsea are next, I can't imagine um, a proud investor, a successful investor as Lake Capital and Todd Boehly. I can't see them trying to do anything shady, completely lose all of their assets,
Credibility,
especially
yeah.
the asset they just bought over at Chelsea. I can't see them trying to do anything dirty. I think this loophole that they found is something that is genuine and something that it actually is okay with. And the only reason why I'm hopeful of that is because now um, UEFA and FIFA are trying to kind of nip that loophole in the bud by maxing out player contracts at 5 years. And it's not something set in stone yet, but they're trying to
Weird.
get they don't want teams making or signing players for 8 year deals, which I think is stupid.
Yeah,
Leave
that's
that to the
like that's bad for
team.
the players. That's not bad for the teams, bad for the players. They're trying to maximize
Yeah.
their money.
They UEFA just does not like teams spending so much money and essentially buying success. But um, I don't know. What do you think about this whole Manchester City thing?
Well, I think UEFA does it wrong. I think they've always done it wrong. And it's one thing that I really think American sports does right for the most part. It's and probably baseball does it the best. Football kind of does, but the fact that they don't have guaranteed contracts kind of ruins that. Baseball has a no, they do not have a ceiling in terms of the money that you can spend. You can spend as much money as you like on as many players. However, there is a ceiling and a threshold that if you pass that, you have to pay a luxury tax. Are you familiar with a luxury tax at all or no?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you pay this luxury tax, and it's not insignificant money. Like, even for these billionaires, the luxury tax is like 40% extra on a dollar or something to that tune. It's
Wow.
it's significant. It's like 30 to 40%, and it's like, hey, you're allowed to do this, but just so you know, that $32 million contracts or that 32 million over the tax threshold that you're at is actually quick math, probably like 46. And it's like, whoa. But if you're willing to do it and you have the money to do it, then go ahead. It's not my money. You do what you want with your bread. But just know it's costing. And I really like that. It works a little backwards though, because the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Giants are willing to do that. Sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. Dodgers do. Dodgers are they have the longest active streak over the luxury tax currently, because they're just like, well, let's just pay our players and win. Duh.
Right.
Um, Baseball should implement a floor, and that's like the one real problem that they have currently, because there are teams like the Tampa Bay Rays, Arizona Diamondbacks, the Oakland Athletics are probably the worst example of it. Milwaukee Brewers too. So there's a handful of teams that just kind of refuse to spend money because they don't have to. There's no reason to. Sometimes they're successful without spending that money. So they're like, oh, well, if we can still win some games and not spend money, let's maximize profits. There should be a floor and then like a luxury tax on the floor if you're below it. And then, or not a tax, but you have to spend that money. And if you don't, well, you're going to spend that money. Think of events at our job, $200 minimum. You better spend that $200.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to pay it
And
anyways.
there's a reason that even our job has that for $200. It's because you're signing this contract and you're taking up space in an area that you need to do. If you're an owner in the MLB, there are 30 teams. You better pay money because there's 100 other people who would love to own a team but can't because you already do and don't want to sell the team.
Yeah.
So I think baseball does it right in terms of the higher end. The lower end needs some work, but I mean, they don't have to do investigations and hire PI guys and go and try and read through texts of like this, that, and the other thing, because UEFA, like when they do these investigations, it's so exhausting.
Yeah, it
It's
takes this
it takes
full
years.
will
It
take a
takes
year.
years to find out,
Yeah.
hey, they wrote a note one time that they said maybe we'll pay you a little bit more, and then nothing happens. And then Man City like gets banned from the Champions League from a year, and like who cares? You know?
Like it's like the other thing too is we've known for over a decade now. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
this
since
is
2008.
yeah, we
We've known that
know.
Manchester City. We know Manchester City are a new billionaire club. Knew that financial fair play came into like fruition because of billionaire clubs like Manchester City. So why I you so that's pretty much like there aren't that many teams you have to look at that are going to be possible of breaking financial fair play. It's going to be the PSGs, the Man Cities, the Chelsea's,
Menu.
and the Real Madrid. So yeah, you
Yeah.
don't have that much to kind of monitor. Why is the breaching being made now 4 or 5 years after Man City went in their consistent run of just winning Premier League
It
titles?
makes
It's
no
just so
sense. When
hard.
realistically you could just have this, hey, how much you paying your players per year? Cool. Compile that number. Awesome. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know how much luxury tax would work over there, but like I do think that system
I
works.
think it'll work. I think luxury tax could work. In sport, it'd definitely be less of a hassle trying to investigate every single freaking deal that goes over the line for these clubs.
Yeah.
But the only reason why the UEFA hate this new like billionaire takeover thing is because they're trying to look over the little guy. They're trying to look over the newly promoted clubs in the top leagues. They're trying to look out for the teams that don't have much money. So they're always trying to protect the David and against all these Goliaths, right? Trying to they're essentially they look at these billionaire takeovers as keeping the successful team successful. But yet what we see in so many times and so often, and especially in the Premier League, one of the most competitive league in the entire world, see all of these smaller teams making insane runs like up the table, like breaking the top four, like getting into Champions League. Like, it happens. I mean, obviously it was a complete
When Leicester
anomaly.
did it, Red Bulls over in
Won the Premier
Germany.
League,
Yeah,
like it
it
happens. Like
happens. It does happen.
I mean, obviously Leicester was like a freakish like miracle that they
But it
won the Premier
happens
League,
though. But
but
it
it
happens.
happened. Yeah. It happens that it happens more often than not that these teams break into the top four. I mean, even in like this new ownership takeover for Newcastle United, they were just they now have oil money. They're taken over by a Middle Eastern like oil group. They were taken over about like 18 months ago, and they haven't even been spending much money. I mean, they got a great new coach in Eddie Howe, and they've only spent like on like young, like they haven't spent anything over 50 million on a single player, but they're in third place in the Premier League right now, and their entire team is domestic players who were there before the ownerships took over. So their team is still essentially the same. They just have a great coach, and obviously these players are pretty much fighting for their jobs because they know in the next few years the team will be spending money. But the whole point is the little guys are still being successful to a certain extent. You know what I mean? So the luxury tax would be way better than this whole financial fair play thing.
I do think one thought I've always had about soccer, and it's honestly part of why I can't get into it so much, is that when the little guys do eventually come up, the Leicesters, the Newcastles, when Tottenham even came up, because they weren't like a primary team in the league until a couple of years ago.
And
Uh, they typically wind up selling these players right away. And it's like, oh, here's our great run, like Monaco did with Mbappe. And they just sell them. And then now, when's the last time Monaco was good? They've been pretty
they're probably
horrible.
yeah.
They've been pretty horrible since then. And it's like, yeah, we want to help out the little guys. But then, like, you're just you're creating this space where it's like, hey, in order for you to be successful, you can't be good. You have to build towards the future. And this good thing you have now can't work. And then you sell a guy and they try and get new guys and they don't work. And then it becomes this cycle because the money you used for Mbappe didn't work. So now you're using money you spent on a different guy and it was less than that. And now you have to get that Mbappe money back. It's like, well, here we are. We're just looping like a drunk
Yeah.
person, just broken record. Just
Yeah. The hard thing about that is that these small teams that, into big success is you can't hold these players. Like the players that are, that are, kind of lighting up the scene, going crazy on their runs with these smaller teams is now the big clubs come calling because now these players are playing out of their minds. Players can't say no, not only because for the money they can pay more than these smaller clubs, but also just the almost guarantee that they're always going to be playing in the biggest
the biggest
competitions.
competitions, yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's like kind of another factor in it too. I feel like players in American sports don't really have a say on where they go. Um,
Except basketball. Except basketball. Basketball's
well,
the
they can choose where they go.
basketball is the weirdest sport in the world, man. It's I've been a big advocate, not to fully change subjects, but like that the NBA is the best TV drama in the world. Like it is the best like social media experiment, like the Bachelorette and the Bachelor. It's that just like actually real. It's insane because just like dudes get attitudes and you get these guys that like a majority of them don't come from the best situations and they wind up with all this money and now like some of them want to win, some of them don't care, some of them just want to go to the strip club and do whatever they do, and it winds up being like the best telenovela in the world. And one of the one of the guys, which we didn't talk about because we're not necessarily going over news, but Kyrie Irving got traded this weekend to the Dallas Mavericks, and Kyrie Irving has had the most ridiculous like 3 year run of maybe 4 year run of nonsense ever. He forces his way off a team with LeBron because he's like, I want to be the number one player. So he forces a trade to Boston where he's also not the number one player. tells all the Boston fans, "Oh yeah, I want to sign here. I want to stay here." And then like just leaves the team and like demands a trade cuz he's like, "I hate it here, blah 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 blah." Like and he was like horrible in the playoffs and it was a whole issue and it was a debacle. He winds up leaving.
Essentially, is what it sounds like. That essentially is exactly how players act in soccer too.
It
To
definitely is, but
be
like
honest.
they have
Yeah.
control to an extent of where they go. Cuz then he winds up saying like, "Oh, well like I'm a free agent now, so I'm going to go sign with the Nets." And then he like forced a trade to get Kevin Durant to come to the Nets. He's like, "I want this guy here. So like let's make it happen." And it's like, how do we even do that? Like how are we forcing like this all-time great player to just join this team to make a team? It never makes sense to me. It's so bizarre. And they wound up getting another trade with another top 10 player. And it's like, why are we giving this team like 3 top 10 players? It didn't work out, to be fair, but like, why are we doing this? And they kind of forced their will, like more
Yeah. It
often
seems
than
like
not.
just player power in general, because player power is a thing in soccer too. So,
Yeah, and it
um,
makes sense because like the players kind of run the league. Like I know in soccer, fans will turn on a team or on a player more than they will a team. Like if a player's being a diva, they'll be like, "Oh, well," like Ronaldo for a great example, Man U legend, and then he kind of has that stuff about the organization a couple months ago, and he winds up just leaving, going to Saudi. Like
yeah,
people
he got
turned on
mad that
Ronaldo like pretty quick.
he got mad that he was gonna get subbed on in the 90th minute with seconds left in the game, and
Yeah,
he just walked
and it
out,
just
and that's
became a
just
whole
one
thing.
instance across of many he did. But yeah, um, it's really interesting, how this, so many parallels in sports, and over the next, 2 years, even to a decade, we're gonna see even more parallels.
Yeah.
Maybe more American orders come into sports, but the one to watch will for sure be Boehly at Chelsea because he already laid the groundwork. If he can get even just like a sliver of the same success that the Dodgers have, I mean, Chelsea are looking at dominance for the next 5, 6 years if all things go well.
Yeah. Let me find out how many Dodgers. Uh, let's do like NL West champions. Let's see how many of the last 20 years the Dodgers have won. You're gonna not gonna be you're gonna be very happy to hear this. So they've won their division so many times. Oh my god. Let's start at 2000. Let's start at 2000. So they've won it since 2000, which is what 23 years ago now. 2, 3, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times since 2000. That is over 50% of the times in
The what is
23
that? Wait,
years.
what is that success? You talking about World Series?
No, 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 no. They've won their division, which is really hard to do in
Oh,
baseball.
okay.
They've won their division 12 times, and it's probably been the best or second best division in the sport in that period as well. Uh, they've won their division 12 times in the past 23 years.
Wow.
It's pretty impressive. It's pretty impressive. And I'm pretty sure 4 of those times they didn't, the team that did eventually won the World Series. So it's like, boo
Yeah, that's insane
hoo.
success.
Boo. So they've
Cooking
been,
over here at Chelsea, boy.
yeah, he wasn't there for all of that, but that's the type of thing that you're looking at for the Dodgers,
Right.
where they're just perennially in the playoffs. They always have a superstar, and they're always making a big splash. This is the first off season the Dodgers haven't made a big splash. In fact, they actually did the opposite. They had a guy who they did make a big splash on a couple seasons ago. He had a whole domestic abuse scandal, and it was kind of a weird situation.
Offloaded.
Nobody knows if he did it or not. It was very strange. But they found out about it and they pretty much shunned the guy right away. They're like, "We don't want you." But he was still under contract because he was suspended. His suspension got lifted, and they're like, "Hey, you're gone," and they just cut him. So they owe this guy $26 million this year, and they're like, "Yeah, we don't care. Be gone, be gone."
Yeah, you can't be around that kind of.
A lot of teams do it. It's tough in baseball. There's a lot of it in baseball. So some teams don't care. Some teams let them work their suspension, and it's like, "Hey, man, be better." Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. It's kind of one of those things.
Yeah.
I would love to see a change in the sport, but you know, Dodgers doing that was a good success. Also, shout out to Todd. I think that's a good thing to look forward to too. He was probably one of the guys who were like, "Hey, we don't want you." There's something to be said about like, hey, there's an abuser, a bad person.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, we owe you money, but like, we'll give you the money because we signed this contract, but like, you can go kick rocks. Kind of cool.
Out of there. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, that does go wonder, especially
Team
as an owner
chemistry.
of such a
Yeah.
someone in his state like that. That's good. Yeah, liking what I'm seeing from Todd Boehly. I really am excited for foreseeable future of his reign, group's reign.
Yeah. I mean, it's not even been a full 2 seasons yet, but
Yeah.
hopefully that all kind of works itself out. And we'll see how the players do after this transfer window. I know it's a pretty wild transfer window. So
Yeah.
I do want to mention real quick as well that I am mad at Arsenal because this is the first season I have not cared because they've let me down every single year that I have followed them. and of course now they've been really really good. It's like come on guys. Come
Insane, man.
on, man. Come on.
It,
Shout out to them
it
though.
it's one of those things too where Arsenal have always been known as just so close, but just not enough. They came close to winning the Premier League back in 2013-14. Injuries were a reason, but there's always something why there's something awful. But this season when they started their insane run and back in August, as a lot of people, especially myself, were like, something's gonna happen. Like they're not gonna
Just
keep this.
waiting for them
They're-
to blow it.
yeah, they're like, oh, they're doing fantastic right now. Like props to them, but something's gonna happen. They're gonna get some injuries or just a bad run of form. Something. It hasn't happened, dude. They're still top of the league with a few points in hand. Um, might do it, man. It's crazy. They
Yeah.
might do it.
How many games do they have left?
We have about 15 or 16 games left.
Okay, so there's a good
they're
amount. They only have 5 points up on Man City, so it's not
yeah,
like insurmountable. Don't they have 2 losses and they're only 5 points up? That's a little annoying.
yeah. And there's a also just for a quick little fun gag, if you will, or fun detail. There's a success rate for teams who are top of the league at Christmas, really go on to win the league. The success rate on that, like the amount of times it happens, like it's like 95%, dude.
Really?
So like the team that like top of the league at Christmas tends to go and win the league. The last time that a team was top of the league at Christmas, didn't win the league, you can guess who that was.
It was Arsenal.
It was Arsenal.
It was Arsenal. Yeah.
So
That
something can
sounds
still
right.
happen, but
That sounds
typically
right.
they yeah. So this is something that they're trying to get over the hill with.
Yeah, it's as we say in baseball, the Mets are gonna Met, and it just means like they'll figure out a way to blow it. They'll
Yeah.
find a way.
Yeah.
But
The funny thing about this weekend was that Arsenal had to play Everton, and they lose to Everton 1-0. And then the team in second, Manchester City, had the chance to go 3 points closer to close the gap on Arsenal, and they played Tottenham. They lose to Tottenham, so it's almost like might happen, dude. It might
yeah,
happen.
even when they stumble, like they kind of got a little lucky. Well, hey.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, good conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed it all. And if you guys have any other parallels to these pretty much 2 sports that we talked about, you let us know. If you want to see more of Devin, let me know. I mean, we'd love to have him around more often. It's always a good time, always good conversation. Appreciate you popping in on this fine Tuesday. And I know you're working, but I hope you get to watch the Super Bowl. I hope everybody enjoys their Super Bowl weekend. We'll be back again on Monday to talk about it, go over it all, and back to our regularly scheduled program. But this was a fun idea from us. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you follow us at Spectators Media, and you'll see a bunch of posts from Friday in our first ever live event for the Lovers Art Show. I'm so excited for it, and I can't wait for you guys to see all the stuff from it. So thank you again, Devin. Thank you, brother. Take it easy,
man. Thanks for
everybody.
having me.
Peace.